today. My name's Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and thanks for joining our webinar, Simplifying Compliance, How to Align Your Policies with CMMC. During today's conversation, we'll be demonstrating the use of Exostar's Policy Pro application. If you'd like to, there is a free trial available for Policy Pro. You can find it at that website that you see there. You can also go to it from the Exostar website, www.exostar.com. Under Products, you can see Policy Pro there. If you click on that page, you'll see a button to sign up for the free trial as well. Takes about 2 minutes to sign up. I'm going to do a short intro on where we are in the CMMC rulemaking process. So you'll have plenty of time to sign up for that free trial before David gets into that as part of his demonstration today. Just a few housekeeping details before I jump into the beef of the presentation. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. That does include question and answer. There were some questions submitted prior to today's session when you signed up. I'll cover those at the end of the session. You can also submit questions via chat at any time. I'll be answering those as David does his portion of the presentation as well. If for some reason we do have an outage during today's discussion, just wait for a minute and refresh the page, and that should bring it back up. You can also use that link you received via email prior to today's session as well. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library anytime after today's event. You can find that at www.exostar.com/resources. You'll also be receiving the link to the recording as well as today's slide deck as part of the follow-up to today's conversation as well. If at any time you'd like to speak with somebody about Exostar solutions or you have general questions about CMMC, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. You can also chat with us from our website at www.exostar.com. There's a chat widget on every page, and you can reach us via that channel as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, my name's Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. I'll be doing a brief introduction of the CMMC rulemaking phase, but I'm also joined today by David Rowe of ISMS Solutions. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is David Rowe. I'm the Business Development Manager here at ISMS, and happy to show the platform and how it works today.
Great. Thanks, David. So kind of where we are in the rulemaking process. So the proposed rule appeared in the Federal Registry as a great Christmas present to us all on 12/26 of 2023. That kicked off a public comment period for 60 days. That public comment period closed on February 26th of 2024, and there were over 3,000 public comments submitted during that phase. Now the DoD has gone and started to, if you will, address those questions, flesh out the rule, provide additional clarification, justification, etc., as they, look to finalize the CMMC rule itself. Now, in reading the rule as it currently stands, the biggest thing to remember is that what CMMC does, it moves us away from today's self-attestation model of organizations' compliance with NIST 800-171 or other controls that are required, and moves to a model of certified third-party assessments. What that means is if you're looking or if your organization receives controlled unclassified information as part of your contract, you'll have to receive an every 3-year assessment from a certified third party. That, when you hear the term C3PAO, that is a certified third-party assessment organizations. They're the ones who are going to come, into your organization once every 3 years and say, "Yep, you do adhere to the 110 controls in NIST 800-171. You've got the evidence to back that up. Here's your valid assessment." You're still going to have to, affirm yearly that you also abide by those, you've updated the rules, etc. Now, there's been some talk throughout this period about POAMs, plans of action and milestones. These are what you use to manage your overall NIST 800-171 compliance program. So if you haven't implemented a particular control, you should have a POAM, a plan of action and milestone, to address that, to implement that control, if you will. It should be assigned to somebody in your organization, and you should manage to that closure. So with the rule as it is written, in the Federal Registry and as it's being proposed, is that POAMs will only be allowed for certain controls. And if you've ever looked at the different controls, they each have a numeric value, a 5, a 3, or a 1. So you'll only be able to have POAMs against certain, value 1 controls. And if you do have those open POAMs, they've got to be closed within 180 days. So, once you do a self-assessment and you've identified something you don't do, you've got 6 months to close that POAM. Just a reminder, right? These are those different levels of CMMC. Level 1 is, your organization does not receive controlled unclassified information. If that's the case, then you don't need to adhere to all 110 controls. You have 15 requirements because you only handle federal contract information, FCI. That still is going to have an annual self-assessment, right? You're going to have to assess your organization against those 15 requirements, and every year affirm that you still do that. If your organization does receive controlled unclassified information, at a minimum, you're going to be level 2. And level 2 is where you need to comply with 110 NIST 800-171 controls. You need to, as part of that assessment of your completion of those controls, you need to ensure that you have the proper policies and procedures in place that explain how your organization does these things. You'll have to provide evidence that you do those things, and you'll need to be ready when an assessor comes on site to do those assessments, that you have staff trained in doing those, right? That they can actually show you how you update a config file, show how you create, an ACL for a particular organization or user, et cetera, or add them to your directory, things like that. And that, that will have to be assessed once every 3 years by that certified third party. Level 3 is also a third party assessment, right? You've got additional controls that you have to abide by, and there'll be a once every 3 year government-led assessment. That means that DIBCAC, that's the auditing group within the Department of Defense, will be the ones who do that third-party assessment of your organization. Now, those percentages you see on the left, that's the kind of the percentage of organizations within the defense industrial base that the DoD has identified that fall into these different categories. There are also 3 key terms that were kind of identified within the CMMC rule. One of those is an ESP, an external service provider. These are organizations that process, store, or transmit controlled unclassified information, or they provide security protection data around your systems that do. this is often those MSPs or MSSPs, those managed security or those managed services providers or managed service or security service providers, sorry, that may do a portion of your IT. They may provide a particular kind of service for your organization, etc. These are what the ruling considers as those external service providers. According to the rule, if you engage with an external service provider, that organization also needs to be at the same CMMC level that you are trying to achieve. Additionally, if you utilize a cloud service, something like Microsoft's GCC High environment or a service from there, things like Exostar itself, right? Exostar has a managed Microsoft 365 solution that is a FedRAMP moderate equivalent solution, which provides a cloud service to store, process, or transmit controlled unclassified information. This is that portion of the rule that says, hey, if you're utilizing a cloud service, it must be FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP moderate equivalent solution, and and if you will, the evidence that that organization needs to provide to you as part of the overall assessment procedures. Now, when CMMC does take effect, and it's expected to take effect in early 2025, sometime in that first quarter of 2025, so sometime between January to March, there is a phase-in period. So in this, right, that first 6 months from whenever it does take effect, it'll be really kind of what it is today. It's a level 1 and level 2 self-assessment. But after that, right after that first 6 months, you'll start to see in new contracts that if you're level 2, you're going to have that third-party assessment. Phase 3 will start to get to level 3. We'll also start to they'll also start to implement this in option periods of older contracts that are out there, as well as those new contracts. And then in phase 4, that's when you really start to see full implementation. So, what the DoD is telling us is this is going to take effect. And really the whole CMMC community agrees with that, right? This has gone through, many different administrations, both Republican and Democrat, et cetera. It's continued on throughout its adoption period and stayed pretty much intact, right? Even though it's morphed and changed a little bit, right? We had a version 1, now we're at version 2, et cetera. But it has stayed intact, and it is fully expected to take effect, in 2025 and really early in 2025. So even though CMMC isn't yet in effect, right, there are still contractual obligations you have today if you've got contracts either as a contractor directly with the Department of Defense or as a subcontractor to somebody who does have that. Right. These are those DFARS clauses, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation clauses, that are part of your contract. And these are, as you see here, 7012, 7019, or 7020. Right. 7012 says that if you receive controlled unclassified information, you as an organization attest that you meet the 110 controls of 800-171. If you've got those DFARS clauses 7019 in your contracts, you are required to do an annual self-assessment. You're required to score yourself. That's where, that 171A, that's the assessment guide for NIST 800-171 comes into play to say whether or not you've implemented a particular control, take the score of that particular control, and gather that that overall assessment score and enter that score into the SPRS system. If you make a change, obviously, hopefully for the better, right? You closed a poem out and you change your score. You should then go back into the SPRS system and update that. And the reason for that is that contracting officers for the Department of Defense will look at the SPRS system when awarding contracts. And this is one of those elements of your overall risk score that they can take into account when awarding contracts. So with that said, what you're going to see today with Exostar's Policy Pro is an application that will help you build out those policies and procedures for how you implement and how you control or how you satisfy the various NIST 800-171 controls. Now, these are 110 controls across 14 control families. You need policies and procedures around each of those. The Policy Pro application provides you templates around those, allows you to update those to fit your particular organization, allows you to take maybe existing policies that you already have as well as the new ones that you create, run that through its AI engine. It then provides you feedback on how to improve those scores, whether those are keywords that you should have included, maybe you need to expand in certain areas, maybe in one particular one that you have from from something you've done in the commercial space can give you those indicators that what you may need to change to make it fit the 800-171 requirements. This is offered out as a service and a platform from Exostar in cooperation with our partner ISMS. And so to kind of show you how this works, I'm going to turn it over to David to show you how the Policy Pro application works itself. So with that, David, I will turn it over to you.
Kevin. All right, so as Kevin mentioned, today's workshop or webinar will be walking through a demo of Exostar's Policy Pro. It is a SaaS-based platform to help you and your organization get compliant around the various requirements and standards that your organization is likely facing as DoD contractors or subcontractors, including the NIST 800-171 practices and controls, as well as the CMMC 2.0 framework. Regardless of where your organization is in your cybersecurity journey, so whether you're just getting started, maybe you don't have any policies in place and don't even really know where to begin, or maybe your organization is further along and you already have all of your policies in place. Regardless, the tool will be able to help assist you throughout that entire process. We'll start off utilizing our Policy Builder tool, and this is really the first step you should be taking for your CMMC journey if you don't have anything in place at all, which are your policies and your procedures. So the first time through on the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, and it's a brief explanation of what policies are, as well as some of the other documents that your organization should either have already or will need to create as you're working through your CMMC program. For example, it could include things like your gap assessments, your risk register, your POAM, which is that plan of actions and milestones, as well as your SSP, which is your system security plan. We do provide templates to those if you don't have any of those documents. They are pretty bare bones templates, so if you need further assistance in creating any of those other documents, definitely check out a companion product that's also part of the CMMC bundle, and that is Certification Assistant, and Kevin will talk about that further after this demo. So once you've closed out of that, as I mentioned, we are talking about CMMC version 2, specifically level 2 today. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, these are the 14 policy domains your organization will need to cover for all of your policies, starting from access control all the way down to system and information integrity. We'll start off with an access control policy example here, and it'll take you to our Prepare, Gather, and Consult page. This is everything your organization will need to prepare prior to even getting started with the policy template itself. For example, it could include things like gathering your organization's documents, processes, and procedures related to these various access control topics. Additionally, who you might want to consult with, whether they are internal or external stakeholders. For example, it could include people like your network administrator, head of IT, or CISO, and then any sort of outside contractor if applicable. So those are your ESPs, your MSPs, your MSSPs, and IT consultants. Once you have all of that prepared, you'll then come to our policy template. And all of our policy templates are broken out into a couple different sections. We've got the header here, which includes your organization name, the department or departments this policy falls under, the issue date for when you finalize the document, approved by, and the tracking number. The tracking number can be used in a number of ways. However, most people use it to keep track of the version number of the policy. So as you work on revisions and updates, you'll update that tracking number accordingly. The other sections include the purpose, the scope, and the individual practices. So as Kevin mentioned, there are 110 practices associated with those 14 policy domains, and we break out each practice individually here. Before moving on to the practices, which is where the bulk of your work is going to be done, we also do provide templates to the NFO and NCO controls as well. So if you need templates to those, you can click here right above the practices to access those. Moving on to the practices, there's a couple of key pieces of information here before you actually get started with the templates. The first is the practice ID number. In this case, it's access control 3.1.1. Next to that is the practice description, limiting information system access to authorized users. And then finally, underneath that are going to be the guidelines. The guidelines will help you understand exactly what sort of information should be included in that particular practice, as well as kind of in plain English, explain exactly what that particular practice is about. Once you have all of that prepared and you're ready to move on, you'll then click on this pencil icon here located on the right-hand side, and that's going to bring up our policy template for 3.1.1. So we can see this particular policy is about our organization's account creation, work from home, and bring your own device policy. A couple notes as you're working through these policy templates. One, ensure that you're reading through the entirety of the template. You want to ensure that what's written in our templates reflects what your organization has implemented or what your organization plans to implement based off your policies. Another important aspect to consider as you're working through these is to ensure that certain sections definitely need to be customized to fit your organization, and we'll walk through a couple examples here together. So in the first paragraph, it says all account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the account request ticketing system or other process. So there, depending on if you are utilizing a ticketing system or if not, whatever other process it is you're utilizing to process those account creations and handle those requests, that's what you want to make sure to fill in. Another example is here in the second bullet where it says systems administrators and members of the IT support team shall respond and act accordingly to requests within a timely fashion, offering at least a blank hour turnaround for account creation. So again, there, depending on how long it's going to take your organization to process those requests and create those accounts, whether that's 4 hours or 24 hours, just make sure to fill in that section there. So once you've made all of those changes, you'll save any changes you wish to make. And that's going to timestamp it as well as who the user was who made that change. And it'll be on a section by section or practice by practice section. So if you do have multiple users working on in the platform at the same time, you can see exactly which sections have been updated and by whom, and ensure that you've gone through all of the practices and sections that you need to go through. Once you've done that, you'll then click on this export button here located on the bottom right-hand corner, and that's going to do a couple things. It's going to combine all of those sections I mentioned previously, so the header, the purpose, the scope, and those individual practices into a single access control document. that will then be saved to your local hard drive. So you'll have a local copy of all of your policies as a Word document, and it's also an important step prior to the next feature of the platform. So once you've exported that and you have that Word document, that Word access control policy, you'll move on to policy assessment. Policy assessment is where you'll assess and analyze your policies to ensure that it's covering everything it needs to cover for CMMC. This is also where I mentioned earlier on, maybe your organization already has some or even all of your policies done. You still want to utilize a tool like Policy Pro to assess it and ensure that it's covering everything it needs to cover. So we'll go ahead and upload a policy here together. And as long as this policy is in these accepted formats, doc, docx, or PDF, we're going to be able to assess that document for you. So again, you can either use a policy created in our policy builder, or if you have an existing document or even multiple documents, you can upload all of those into the system for assessment. We'll go ahead and submit this document here together, and pretty quickly you'll see some results surrounding that document. The next step is to click on this detailed scorecard here to bring up this pop-up. So we can see that our overall assessment for this policy that I've uploaded appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. The overall assessment is comprised of 3 different key metrics. We've got the relevance, which is how many key terms or phrases are included in your policy. The higher that is, the higher the relevance, and therefore overall assessment is going to be. The model similarity compares the policy you've uploaded to our model documents, and we do that for 2 reasons. One, to ensure it's been appropriately customized and fitted to fit your organization's implementations, as well as ensure it's covering everything it needs to cover. Finally, the word count is simply to ensure there's enough context to give you an accurate assessment. Both the overall assessment and the overall score will be impacted if your word count is too low. There's kind of 2 remedies to that. One, you can increase the length if it makes sense to do so. Otherwise, just note that the overall assessment and overall scoring might not necessarily be an accurate reflection of how your policies are doing. In terms of the overall score, here you can see it's 70.7%. A note about our overall scoring system, it is not like an academic score, meaning 90% as an A, 80% as a B, etc. Our overall scoring is a relevant scoring system, meaning anything above a 50% is a relevant document. But I'll talk further on in the demo about how you can utilize the overall score along with some of the other feedback we provide you to see how your policies are doing both holistically as well as specifically as well. So that's kind of the high-level overview of how your policy is done, but we also provide some granular feedback as well and specific areas and things that your policies are missing. And we do that through our key elements not included, or KENNY for short, and we have 2 different types of KENNYs. We've got the control KENNYs as well as the general policy KENNY terms. My first example of a control KENNY is CUI non-public information. That is that key term or phrase that's missing in my policy that I should be looking to include and incorporate in my next revision. You can see some additional information underneath that control KENNY, and that is that actual practice that's associated with that KENNY. So in this case, it's tied to 3.1.22. And if you're unsure exactly what that is and what that's discussing, we provide the discussion, and this comes directly from CMMC itself, so you don't have to swap back and forth between the platform and the standard to figure out exactly what 3.1.22 is discussing when you're working on revising your policies. The documents for examination are going to be other sorts of documents, records, or materials that your organization might have already created that can help you address that particular control KENNY. Additionally, these documents for examination can also be used as evidence and artifacts that you are indeed implementing the specific practice as well. For example, it could include things like your security plan or list of users, maybe awareness training records, again, any sort of document or record that's relevant to that particular control KENNY. certain control kennies, for example, FIPS here, are tied to multiple controls. In this case, it's tied to 3.1.13 as well as 3.1.17. So in the case of FIPS or any other control kennies like that are tied to multiple controls like that, you want to address it in each control that is referenced under. The general policy kenny terms are very similar in the sense that there are also key terms and phrases that are missing in my policy. However, you'll notice there's no collapse all, expand all button here. And the reason for that is these general policy kenny terms are not tied to a specific practice like that, like the ones above. They are more generic to your policy type, in this case, an access control. So as you're working on taking a look at this assessment, you want to ensure that you're working through these kenny elements and adding it and incorporating it into your policies, and then obviously implementing those policy items into your organization. You can also export these results into a PDF if you want to save this locally or share it with others who aren't on the platform. You can certainly do that as well. One last feature in policy assessment I want to talk about is this management approval feature, and we can discuss it further in our dashboard. So the dashboard is where you'll come to see all your progress and work throughout the platform. Whether you are creating policies using our policy builder tool and our templates, or you're assessing policies and policy assessment, you'll see all of that work reflected here in the dashboard. Additionally, if we scroll down here, we can see our latest policy here in the green check mark with the management approved. This shows that senior company officials have taken a look at your policies, your organization's policies, and approved of your final version. So this acts as a policy management tool, as a tool to ensure that you have artifacts proving that you are in compliance with that particular requirement. It'll timestamp it, the user who approved it, and any other previous management approved policies will be there in the blue check mark. So as you're periodically reviewing and updating your policies, you can ensure that everyone in your organization is following the most up-to-date policies for your organization. You'll also notice all of those other metrics I mentioned earlier, including the overall assessment, the control, as well as general kennies, and that overall score. So as you're working on updating and revising your policies based off your kenny results, you'll see those kennies going down and your overall score going upwards. What you want to do is ensure that the score is above a 50%, that the kennies are reduced down as much as it makes sense for your organization to do so, and that you see that score trending upwards. Again, doesn't need to be a specific score to be a good document. You just want to ensure that it's above a 50% and your score is trending upwards. Lastly, I want to talk about our reference library. This is where you can come to if you need some additional guidance and resources as you're working through your policies. Most of these directly link to the NIST Institute, but it's an easy way to get the information that you need for a particular topic. For example, maybe one of your kennies was related to VPNs or maybe mobile devices, and you're unsure how to address that within your access control policy. You can come here to the reference library, select the appropriate link, and that'll take you to the latest NIST guidelines for how to address that for your organization. Everything in today's demo was done for level 2, but we also have level 1 available on the platform as well. So if you select level 1 here, you can see that it switches to just those 6 different policy family domains and the 17 practices. So for organizations that do not have transmit, process, or store CUI, you can certainly start on the level 1, and maybe later on, if your organization decides to bid on contracts with CUI or contracts that do have those DFARS clauses, it's easy to swap to the level 2 at a later time and work on the remaining policies and practices associated with level 2. So hopefully that's been a helpful overview. Again, Policy Pro is a great place to start for your CMMC program, especially if you don't have those policies in place. And even if you do have those policies, you want to ensure that everything everything is covered under those particular policies. And as the standards update, for example, NIST 800-171 is going through a revision 3. So as new updates and revisions, whether it's to NIST or CMMC, the platform will get updated accordingly. And you want to make sure that everything's up to date for your organization. So with that, hopefully it's been a helpful demo, and I will turn it over to Kevin to walk through some additional items here.
Great, thanks, David. Hey, everybody, I just want to, because this conversation is going on chat on the side, so there is some confusion about the number of practices in level 1. So as the rule was proposed in December, and let me make sure I've got the right reference up here. Here it is. Let me share this out with everybody. There are, let me share before I talk. So there are 15, level 1 is comprised of 15 basic safeguarding requirements specified in FAR Clause 52-204-21, right? This is from the Federal Registry from 12/26/2023. This is, the current guidance, so that's, but if you Google today, like if you Google level 1 requirements, you will most likely see 17. And the reason for that is that, excuse me, it was 17 for a long time. Prior to it being published into the Federal Registry, all my slides, right, and everybody else's slides said 17 because that was the expectation. When it went into the Federal Registry, that's where it went to 15. And so that's what our current guidance is. So that's my best answer on that to everybody out there. So it is 15, but if you Google it, you will get confused because the first ones that come up will say 17. Because that was, from 2021 until 2023, as it went through, as CMMC went through its various phases, it was 17, like I said, but now it's 15. And as far as we know, it'll be 15. What actually gets published, we'll see, but right now it's 15. So hopefully for this group, I can at least, provide some helpful hints around that one. So David, thanks so much for that. So as David mentioned, Policy Pro is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. It is that first step where you need to create those policies and procedures around your compliance with the different requirements. If you're ready to go through that NIST 800-171 assessment for level 1, 2, or 3, you can also use Exostar's Certification Assistant. This application walks you through, those different controls across those 14 control families, allows you to put in whether or not you've implemented those, how you've implemented them, right? Allows you to build that policy library, those different procedures you have in place for each of those, allows you to link to the evidence you have of how you implemented those. If you haven't done one, allows you to create that POAM against it. And if that control has recurring activities around it, allows you to schedule those tasks to be accomplished. So really allows you to manage that overall NIST 800-171 CMMC program for your organization. If you're looking for something to help you store, process, or transmit CUI, controlled unclassified information, if you need that enclave up in GCC High, Exostar has a solution around that. It's called our Managed Microsoft 365. And then we also have a number of third-party organizations and partners that can do, everything from a readiness assessment, a gap analysis of where you are and where you need to be. Some of our partners are C3PAOs, so if you're looking for somebody to do that assessment for you, we can help you with that as well. These organizations also use the Policy Pro and Certification Assistant as part of their delivery of those services. So they can work with you directly in those tools as well. So I'm going to start a poll. I'd love it if you wouldn't mind participating in that. I'm going to open that up. This provides us feedback on how we did today, as well as provide some additional information for us. So I'd love to have you participate in that. As I mentioned, we did get a few questions submitted prior to today's session, so I'm going to cover those now. So let's see, number one, we are a small business and it has been recommended that we go through an ESP to be NIST 801 compliant. We've begun researching this. Can you elaborate on what services an ESP should provide and what we should look for? So the first thing to consider when you're looking for an ESP is what it is. Remember, with the current guidance, those ESPs need to be at the same CMMC level that you're trying to achieve. So when you're looking for an ESP, right, and I understand, that today, right, you're not going to be able to find an ESP that is level 2, right, because it's not there yet. But you should be confident that they're going to pursue that as soon as it's available. So you should find an ESP that's at the same level that you want to get to. You want, and when you engage with them, it's kind of, do you need somebody to do everything for you? Or do you just need them to fill in gaps? And go in with that kind of attitude and know what you need before you start those conversations with them. Right? So number two, ITAR compliance has very strict requirements. What level of CMMC is needed to be safe for ITAR? And this is going to be one of those, well, it depends, because ITAR are different requirements than CMMC. So all ITAR is not controlled unclassified information, right? ITAR is a export agreement. So, you can only send stuff, certain things to certain other organizations, countries, etc., if you've got that export license, and you need to do that in a compliant manner. So not all CUI is ITAR, or not all ITAR is CUI. So it's going to depend. Typically, when you're looking for an ITAR compliant solution, you want to know that it meets those ITAR requirements. And, if those are typically that it's got to be US citizens on US soil that manage or have access to those kinds of systems. So if you're relying on a third party to assist you in some of these things, and part of your ITAR compliance needs is CUI that you're going to get, then those systems will have to kind of follow those same guidelines. So I'm going to ask David to do number 3. So David, do you have or will you provide a sample document for us to develop our policy?
So as you saw in the demo, hopefully the policy builder tool does have templates for each policy domain. So you can definitely take a look. It's even available on the free trial as well. So take a look at all of those templates, and we do have a template for each practice as well. So, so those will allow you to customize it to fit your organization, and at the end of that process, you'll have a complete policy set. Whether you're going for level 1 or level 2, you'll be able to have all those policy templates.
Great, thanks, David. So on 4, right, I kind of answered this as part of 1, but as a small business, we may use an ESP to help comply with many of the requirements. Since CMMC is new and not due to go into effect until 2025, how do we also be ready to be compliant in 2025 if there aren't any currently compliant ESPs out there? And this kind of goes to that statement that I said is, when you're looking for an ESP, you need them to be at the same CMMC level which you're trying to achieve. You won't really find those out there today. Now, there may be some, right? For the past year to 18 months, the Department of Defense has been sponsoring what's called a Joint Voluntary Assessment Program. That program allowed organizations that were, that felt they were ready for that assessment to schedule that with DIBCAC, right? As I mentioned before, DIBCAC is DoD's arm. assessment or audit agency, and they're the ones that are going to be performing the level 3 assessments. That organization, along with organizations that are C3PAOs, have been doing these joint voluntary assessments for different organizations. So you may find an ESP that has already gone through that. I think that'll be rare currently. So you would want to find an ESP that you're confident, right, is ready to, or commits to you as part of their overall, arrangement with you, that they're going to get that assessment that you require. You may want to make that a contractual obligation. You may just, understand what they do. You may know them. You may work with them in the past, etc. So it would behoove you to, to understand where they are, what their plans are going forward, when they expect to have that assessment done, etc. So when you go to your assessment and they become part of your overall team that's delivering your controls, that that they meet those requirements. So those are all the questions you received. I think I answered most of the ones that came in through chat. I'm going to stay on for just a little bit answering those, but I want to thank everybody for your time today and for your attention. We have a number of other events coming up. Right? We do a weekly workshop on our managed Microsoft 365 application and solution. If you're interested in an enclave to store, process, or transmit controlled unclassified information, every Thursday at 2 o'clock, we have that. You can sign up for that on our website. We do also a webinar around our certification assistant. There are free trials available for Policy Pro and Certification Assistant. Those are both available on our website to sign up for. We also offer a free CMMC webinar once a month. That's a general topic webinar on, if you will, topics of the day around CMMC. Oftentimes have partners or other experts come in and talk to the audience about those topics. So I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm going to, just answer some questions over chat. Feel free to head out. If you've got some other questions, let me know.